Solana's done a really excellent job at attracting a lot of founders in the broader DePIN and AI categories. Imagine having not competed in the internet, what that would have resulted in. I think that the ETFs are kind of the end-all, be-all vehicle. It's a double-edged sword. It's anyone's guess as to how that plays out, but nonetheless, the capital is coming in.
GM, and welcome back to Solana Floor. Today we're chatting with Brandon Potts from Framework Ventures, which you may have heard of because they were one of the early backers of Jito Labs. And as you most likely know, Jito is, of course, one of the more critical parts of the Solana network nowadays. Now, we often speak to founders on Solana Floor, but we rarely speak to the VCs who help bring these projects to life. And I was reminded earlier today of the old saying that goes something along the lines of, don't tell me what your opinions are, but show me what your portfolio is, aka, are you putting your money where your mouth is? So I'm excited to pick Brandon's brain today on some of the bigger trends that he sees unfolding across the Solana ecosystem, so we can hopefully get a better sense of where capital might be flowing in the coming period. Brandon, GM, and welcome to Solana Floor.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Brandon, one of the discussions that was happening on stage during Crossroads was this evolution of capital allocation, with there being multiple VCs on stage. So, as the Solana guy at Framework Ventures, over the past year, how has your view of capital allocation and the way you think about Solana shifted? Are you digging deeper into infrastructure plays? Are you focusing more on consumer? Or is there something unexpected that's happening?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, what's been interesting to see is just like the core improvements that are rolling out at the protocol level itself. How quickly, some of the teams at Anza, for example, are shipping. Jito, of which we're investors, they're really tip of the spear on performance, in my opinion, and kind of servicing, others coming in and wanting to land transactions into Solana. So they're, shipping very quickly and really leaders there. I think the question is, if you're coming in and you're building infrastructure, the question quickly becomes, okay, how relevant is this in 12 or 18 months, assuming some of the building blocks we're using today are improving in their own right? And so we're always looking at that, of course. Another team that we're super bullish on and we're investors in, I was a part of leading their seed round, was DFlow. And DFlow is working in, a lot of market structure and frankly, just, order flow and trading execution, really improving execution across the board for anyone who wants to trade or land a block really into Solana. And so I think when I zoom out, what's new about Solana, or relatively new, or in terms of how I think about it, it's really owning kind of the front end, the top of funnel, the consumer, the social. It has a lot of social momentum. It has a lot of users, Solana does. And that really just widens up the design space. It makes it a compelling place to spend time, because you're not just getting the 13th perps exchange coming, or like the 12th club, or hey, we're building another validator client or something like that. And so to answer your question, it generally depends. But what I've seen over the last 12, 18 months or so, the infrastructure is improving. And so the question becomes, who's going to come in and take advantage of this to go and capture either users or liquidity, generally just get traction and adoption.
If we think into the future, obviously you guys made a very good bet with Jito. What other types of projects are you evaluating or looking at the moment in that sort of same light of this could be fundamental to the network over the next 3 to 5 years?
We're also working with teams at the intersection of, like I mentioned, DePIN and AI. We have teams like Star Power that are working in kind of the DePIN energy realm. And of course, they want to work on Solana due to, as you said, it being fast and cheap. And obviously, if you're looking to service end users in something that's more consumer facing, fast and cheap, that's a value prop that lands and frankly is a prerequisite. But look, I think Solana's done a really excellent job at attracting a lot of founders in the broader DePIN and AI categories. Frankly, I'm not the biggest fan of the term DePIN. I think we could probably, as an industry, come up with something better. But just to use kind of the crypto parlance, DePIN, a lot of it is taking place in Solana. And I enjoy meeting with these founders because DePIN can be just about anything, right? You have folks coming in and disrupting, maybe it's web crawlers or ISPs or bandwidth or telco or you name it, right? Like the context shifting when you're meeting with these founders is just about every possible application or category. And then what we're doing internally is deciding whether or not, A, this team is qualified to go and take that on. They have the prerequisite skills, contacts, et cetera, to get in there and make a meaningful business. But then B, is this the right timing? Is this the right, business model? And that's a large part of what we do. And AI, like I said, it's a net new category, I would say, across the board. But Solana's done a really good job of attracting founders in that realm as well. So, yeah, to summarize, we're broadly generalist and we're looking across the full stack. So everything, like I said, from infrastructure to certainly DeFi to the DePINs, of which there are many. DePIN, I think, again, is too kind of restrictive of a term, and then AI as well.
And speaking of being bullish, market sentiment seems to have flipped again recently. There was sort of a few month period there where people were wondering if the bull run's over, or if meme coins ended crypto forever, and all sorts of crazy questions being thrown around. But Bitcoin was back at all-time highs a couple of days ago, also sort of still lingering. But what do you think of this rally? Is it a function of shifting political tides? Have the fundamentals changed? Is it new capital coming into the space? Is it M2 money supply, as one of the theories goes? Like, what do you think is driving this push of Bitcoin back towards all-time highs that we've seen in the last week or so?
I mean, what a question, right? Everyone's asking this question. I think for starters, I would start at the social layer. At least here in the US, we were operating out of a somewhat adversarial environment under the Biden administration. And I, talked about this on the panel at Crossroads, but nonetheless, when the Trump administration came in, there was a huge 180 and shift in tone. And look at the people heading up these agencies or the SARs of these departments or really spearheading these initiatives. It's the writing's on the wall, or frankly, it's even on chain. Go look on chain or on Twitter, listen to what they're saying in their interviews. They want, crypto to be supported here in the US. And not only that, they're talking about what percentage of Bitcoin, for example, is owned by Americans. What percentage of these networks were developed here? And so there's very much kind of a, United States made in America theme happening in the background. But then from the macro perspective as well, everyone's looking at some of these budget deficits and Doge and where interest rates going to go from here. And Bitcoin certainly responds to those indicators as well. And obviously you've seen gold rip. Bitcoin, has some correlation to that. It's not, one to one by any means, but Bitcoin plays this it plays this game very well in terms of it can be very risk on and correlated to growth stocks, for example, and tech, or it can be correlated to gold. And so it kind of plays this piggyback game where depending on what the narrative or the sentiment or the zeitgeist is of the day, there's always a reason to own Bitcoin. And so I think against that backdrop, Bitcoin's running, obviously. And then with Bitcoin running, it very quickly becomes a game of, okay, what's next? What else can people do with blockchains beyond kind of money and store of value? And just generally, how do we start to understand some of the fundamentals on a forward-looking basis for these ecosystems? And so, yeah, I think those are some of the key elements. And the thing I would highlight now is it's super fun to be in crypto because everyone's cracking the whip. It's very competitive now. And what I like to say is the playing field is level now. Like you see Solana sort of pushing the limits on how quickly they can scale the P2P stack or the scheduler, or consensus itself is being rewritten. What I would say is just across the board, everyone's more sophisticated now. The conviction in crypto being real and blockchains being useful is no longer kind of an open question. And so now it's becoming a race to attract use cases, users, liquidity, activity, and generate fundamentals that people can start to underwrite for the long term.
Do you feel, based on this change, this sort of this optimism that's coming out of the White House with the AI and crypto czar as well, that the US is going to be creating not just a space that's pro speculation, but also pro innovation? Is that going to happen in the coming weeks, months, years?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I pair crypto with the AI stuff, which I think to your point, David Sachs is the czar here of crypto and AI, or AI and crypto, depending on who they're talking to. They stack rank one and two. And all that to say is, look, this is a new economy. Imagine having not competed in the internet, what that would have resulted in terms of your GDP or your economy or just your ability to attract a new tax base, right? People coming in and generating new businesses. I mean, that's the function of government, is to enable net new use cases so that you can tax them realistically. And so, look, at the United States, obviously the world leader, the world's largest economy, what the people see happening in the US will be translated all across the world, not to just be US centric here, but it does kind of start at the top, in my opinion, as it relates to nation states trying to understand, okay, how do we enable this, or how do we, link this net new financial system into our legacy system in kind of the regulatory compliant way as we see fit. And so make no mistake about it, this is a global phenomena. Many other countries have been looking or working at this for a while. But when they look over the fence and see the United States actively trying to push here, they respond in kind and they go, hey, look, we want to compete here too. And I mean, look at AI, for example. People are plowing all sorts of money into AI and looking to build out data centers and attract founders. The same phenomena is happening in crypto. It's just maybe not as flashy, or there maybe aren't, as many folks allocating capital to it, and the fundraise headlines may not be as large. But make no mistake, people are actively pushing into crypto all across the world.
Speaking of competition, there's two sort of arms races, if you will, that are happening at the moment within the Solana ecosystem, and I want to focus on those. One of them is launchpads. You've got PumpFun and all the new ones like Believe that are coming up. But the second one that I find a little bit more interesting is crypto treasury plays. Sol Strategies is maybe the original one in Solana, and then you've got DeFiDevCorp and a bunch of other ones that are popping up as well. And everyone seems to be trying to emulate the success of Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy, now just strategy. So, my question to you, as somebody who thinks probably day to day about how to allocate capital in the most efficient way, is do we expect to see more of these treasury plays emerging over the next 6 to 12 months? Or are we reaching saturation perhaps and we're heading towards a bit of a shakeout? How do you see that arms race of treasury plays playing out in the next 6 months, 12 months, 18 months?
Well, let me put it back to you in something of a rhetorical, which is how many of these vehicles do we realistically need? Is it three? Is it six? Is it 25? Is it, we need three per asset? It's an open question in my mind. Obviously, we chat with the folks and try to understand how they're structuring these things and what's the long term thesis, and how do you look to provision this debt and roll it over, and what's kind of the thought process there. They're all very bespoke in how they're implementing these things. It's a lot of financial alchemy, or frankly engineering sometimes. But look, I think the writing's on the wall that people are bullish, like I said, and they want to come in. They want to express a long view on a particular asset. Maybe they're viewing it as beta to the overall market. Maybe they have a specific view on a specific asset over a specific time horizon. But, I think the other thing too is when the ETFs roll out, and we'll see whether they have, their staked assets in it or not. We'll see. I think that the ETFs are kind of the end all be all vehicle. That's where most of retail and passive flows generally go. And so I view a lot of these instruments or vehicles or SPACs or what have you as kind of trying to front run those vehicles coming out. And once those institutional mass distribution assets roll out, we'll find a market equilibrium. It's anyone's guess as to, who remains in the long term. But look, like the 18th kind of, MicroStrategy or strategy for Sol or some long tail asset, maybe not the most compelling play for folks who are crypto native. Maybe for the TradFi folks who don't interact on chain or really have a read on this market, it maybe makes more sense for them.
Do we still need the ETF? Is the ETF approval for Solana still going to be a massive bullish catalyst? Or is it going to be watered down by some of these other vehicles that we're seeing already active on the market?
I mean, look, like I said, I think in the short term, there will be kind of a dilutive or watering down effect, to use your term. If people are trying to front run the ETF and get access to Sol and go levered long Sol before the instrument comes out. But again, like that's more of a short term view. The longer term view is if you're enabling more access to these assets, that's a good thing. And look, it depends on where the end user is coming from. Where do they live? Where are they domiciled? Which brokerage do they have? How do they, frankly, interact with their financial life? And so a lot of this is, frankly, just implementation details, structuring details, the regulatory or licensure details as to who is it that they're servicing as their end user and what does that end user want. But at the end of the day, if all sorts of folks are enabling top of funnel access to invest in Sol, that's a good thing, right? And so the market equilibrium will come. It's anyone's guess as to how that plays out, but nonetheless, the capital is coming in.
And we think for, retail investors like myself, people who don't have access to some of these more bespoke instruments, it's net positive that we are seeing this in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look, for the folks who are maybe a bit more crypto familiar or maybe take a bit more initiative, you can interact with this stuff on chain. That's the entire premise, right, of crypto is it's sort of this alternative financial rail. And look, I think at the end of the day, it's all about enabling more people to come in with less friction. So it depends on kind of the end user. But like I said, these are good things. These are good sort of I wouldn't say they're problems, but these are good, things to be occurring, good developments. And generally, they're just funneling more people into this, whether it be from an education perspective, an access perspective. Maybe it's just like, hey, I can buy this thing through a trusted front end. I've been interacting my entire life with this broker. Now I can buy this asset that gets me access to Sol. Okay, I feel comfortable with that. Let's go ahead and do so.
Specific to these utility plays and treasury plays, can we actually say that there will be a net positive trickle down effect for the people that are only interested or largely interested in the speculative side of life in Solana? Will the degens also benefit from this new capital coming in and going to these treasury plays?
100%. Look, I mean, on the financial nihilism point, I don't really buy into trying to attribute morals or like a worldview into these systems. At the end of the day, these are emergent systems. People are going to be doing all sorts of different things. Imagine sitting here at the onset of the internet and trying to ascribe, moral or ethical sort of values as to what people are going to be able to do with this system. At the end of the day, the user is going to demand what they want, and someone's going to show up and service that demand and build a super large business or protocol or what have you. And so the feedback loop that I think is beautiful in crypto is look, we do have, let's make no mistake about it. People come in and speculate and they have fun, and there's kind of the casino side of it. A large part of what that does, though, is subsidize public goods that translates into A, better infrastructure, better performance, better distribution. But then B, it translates into more products, applications, shots on goal as to what it is, what do people want to do? And so it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes people refrain from interacting in this environment because they see, the casino stuff maybe top of mind, or mainstream media cites hacks and breaches and they try to play it down. But at the end of the day, I mean, this is a part of building out new systems. They're emergent. We don't necessarily understand the end state of all of these.
And from an investment perspective, then, can you give me any specifics as to areas that you've seen this where something new happens and there's a flurry of activity and everyone sort of wants to speculate and capital formation happens, and then it becomes apparent that there is an investment thesis there. Are there any examples in the Solana ecosystem where that's happened?
I mean, look at PumpFun, right? They kind of took this thesis of we can tokenize everything, or anyone can have a token. It can be a meme, it can be super fun, it can be super kind of social and consumer oriented. And look what it did. It stress tested the hell out of Solana itself and some of the systems like Jito, for example. And look, like as a result of that, it generated a ton of demand for block space and was throttling a lot of these systems in kind of their V1 or V2 iteration, if you will. And as a result of that, people came in and were able to optimize. All right, here's a hotspot of state, or here's a system that frankly couldn't stand up to that demand. Okay, so basically it plants these digital pheromones or these signals for the folks at the infrastructure level to go out and attack these friction points and basically break through, these bottlenecks. So that's all I mean to say in terms of like the demand could theoretically come from any application or use case or anywhere. It's just a function of that demand showing up and then providing, the roadmap, if you will, for the next iteration of these products to go out and just make things more efficient. And so that's the feedback loop between the conversation around applications and infrastructure. And a lot of people like to pit them against one another. I think that conversation is kind of ridiculous. You really need both, right? Without one or the other, it doesn't matter. You need the flywheel up. People building infrastructure need application demand in order to understand what is it that we need to do at the infrastructure layer. What use case are we trying to enable? How do we configure around this? How do we refactor, perhaps into our next iteration to service this better? And then, of course, the flywheel continues.
So How do you think about that dichotomy there of do retail investors have more of a chance thinking about utility plays over the next 6 to 12 months, or should we just be super risk averse, invest in Bitcoin, buy some Sol, or the opposite end of the spectrum, which is just get back in the casino?
The age old question. Look, we're a venture firm, so we take a long term time horizon. So we look for things that aren't fleeting in nature, but rather building something that's going to be massive over a long term time horizon. If a retail individual has that same kind of paradigm, if you will, then I think you need to be underwriting things in the same way that we are. What's the credibility of the founding team? How large of a market is it that they're looking to service? And how quickly are they shipping or servicing the use cases that are leveraging them? There's the other side of it too, which is maybe more of the casino, hot money, fast money, short term mentality. And again, if you're someone who's interested in that, like go have fun and find the project that you think is going to rip. But look, at the same time, understand what is it that you're investing in. Is it an equity business? Is all the value ascribed to the token? Okay, now we're underwriting a token. What does the unlock schedule look like? Who's on the cap table? What is sort of the business model for the token itself? And so I think it's nuanced. I don't have a clear answer for you, but the beauty of crypto is people can do whatever they want. That's the entire point. You can come in and speculate on something that you expect to 10x by next week. And if you get profits there, maybe you distribute across a more diverse portfolio that's now long term holdings plus more speculation. So I think that's the general framework I provide to people is like, look, you can go out and have fun and start there, but the second that you win something, what do you want to do next? Do you want to keep speculating and stay in the casino and keep playing the next hand and doubling down? Have fun. I mean, I know plenty of people doing that, and I know some people who've done extremely well. But if you're looking to build sort of a more diverse portfolio or you want to really get involved here, there's an entire other world that's a bit more venture mentality like, which is trying to understand who's going to be just outrageously massive 5 to 10 years from now, and how do I get in for the long term, and how do I underwrite something that's just much longer than what everyone else is looking at. Look, I think there's an element to which you can do. Everyone's trying to arbitrage kind of shorter and shorter time horizons.
Yep.
And it's very rare to find someone who's like, look, I'm going to arbitrage the other end of the time spectrum, which is I'm going to look at the longer term time horizon. If everyone's right here and you're operating on this time horizon, I think you have a unique kind of advantage relative to a lot of the people that you're probably competing with PvP on chain.
So let's extrapolate that VC mindset into 2026 in that case. And let's think about verticals. I'm not going to list a bunch of acronyms here, but some of the high growth verticals seem to be liquid staking, DePIN we talked about, these treasury plays, launchpads. Where are we expecting the most asymmetric returns? Is it one of these verticals that we've briefly touched on today? Or do you think it's going to be something entirely new that we haven't seen yet as a result of some of this regulatory clarity that we're having, and the sort of new primitives that are emerging?
It's going to be both. I mean, to go back to the dichotomy between applications and infrastructure, you have to look at what's the infrastructure that's powering most of this. And if you assume there's going to be growth at the application category, naturally the infrastructure will have more demand. And so you can pretty quickly and easily surmise who's doing a bunch of either the block building or the liquid staking or providing net new use cases around infrastructure and seeing what application developers are coming in and using to build their products. But at the same time, Solana's done a great job at just enabling new businesses to come in and generate, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue inside of like 9 months. A lot of those are predominantly, trading terminals or maybe meme coin platforms or what have you. But I think there's a large sort of opportunity space around, okay, what comes next as it relates to consumer or social, or what else do people want to do? Obviously, to date, a lot of it's been trading and speculation. That will always be an element to this. But who's bringing in maybe a new asset class? Or who's servicing a user base that hasn't been served to date? Or who's bringing new things on chain that have never been brought on chain before? So really, it's wide open.
So give us a bit of a hot take then on some of these net new ideas, net new use cases. I'm sure you get a bunch of pitches and some of them get thrown out faster than others, I would imagine. So yeah, give us a hot take. What's something you've seen in recent times where you thought, absolutely no chance I'm investing even a penny in that?
um, Look, going back to, I think the social shift in terms of crypto no longer being this adversarial environment or having this stigma attached to it. It's going to be legal. Everyone's promoting it. And, again, it's a competitive or innovation, focus for a lot of nation states. That social shift has resulted in a lot of new talent coming in. And this new talent's great because it's generating net new ideas across the spectrum. As of late, to give you just an idea, we're getting, PhD level AI folks pitching us on all sorts of implementations around AI. AI is wide open. It is a massive market. It's arguably the growth engine of the global economy moving forward. And there are all sorts of shots on goal as to like what component or what part of the stack in AI or what's the value prop to this interacting with a blockchain. The other element too, what's hot right now is robotics. AI is kind of, I would say, spurring a lot of excitement and reinvigorating the robotics industry. And there are a number of people coming in that are somewhat AI adjacent because robotics and AI are somewhat, I would say loosely cousins. But look, robotics need what? They need a shit ton of data. And what are you going to do? Go out and kind of scrape the internet like everyone else, or rely on an LLM that's language sort of denominated? Or are you going to go use sort of a blockchain distributed system with token incentives to bootstrap net new data networks, for example? And data is just one use case, right? People are doing hardware implementations, people are doing, software orchestration implementations. We see them. They're coming in, they're excited, they recognize the value prop of what we're building here, and they're looking to enable something new, or maybe take on an incumbent that's looking to, do everything walled garden closed source. So yeah, I'd leave you with that. I mean, I don't know if it's a hot take per se, but what we're seeing are really talented founders kind of shifting their tone towards crypto relative to the last few years and saying, look, there's no stigma to this now. I understand it now. I own some of these assets. I've gone through the educational journey. And now I want to actually build something meaningful, leveraging these systems into a domain that I'm more of an expert on. And I think that lends itself to being very bullish for our industry writ large. Talking of new applications, I mean, an application is great. What about entire new verticals? What about entire new industries and new markets? That's what I'm talking about.
Huge amounts of potential, definitely the cross section of AI and crypto. As you mentioned, some of these verticals newer than others. DeSci, decentralized science, seems to be something that people with a scientific background really struggle with, because they're like, well, why would you want to decentralize science, right? Or they have different criticisms. Do you agree with that, or do you think no? I'm also a bullish DeSci. Do you have any hot takes on that?
Look, if you're building in DeSci, I'm curious to chat with you. It's a very thorny problem, I would say. Typically, science is IP gated and you're trying to sell the licenses to big pharma or someone else. It's very legal intensive. And so, trying to do all of this on chain, I can see an element to which it works, but it's also very challenging. And I think crowdsourcing the funding of biotech investment and the life cycle associated with that, I mean, it takes 5 to 10 years to even see if you're going the right way in terms of testing, getting, maybe FDA approval, getting the buy-in from a larger firm or a larger, organization to fund some of this. It's tough. I'm not going to lie. DeSci is something that the verdict is still out. It's not something we've explored in great depth. But if you're listening to this and you disagree, or you have a cool use case or a really, quality take on how you can build a meaningful business around this, reach out. I'm happy to chat. We're open minded over here. Like I said, crypto is enabling all sorts of new things. The question boils down to the timing of it and the people that are going to build it.
Brendan, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we catch up very, very soon.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jack. Good to see you, man.